Angel of light, come into me. Show me what I need to see.
Welcome to the Small Victories podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria, an inspirational thought leader that offers transformational perspectives based on my unique experiences as a woman born without arms and legs. I feel like my life has been full of small victories that has led me to discover the greatness within. I believe that there is no summit upon which we reach our greatness. I believe it is a culmination of small victories achieved moment by moment when we turn toward the inward battle where we get to choose despair or hope, misery or miracles, defeat or victory. My goal is to awaken your potential, your purpose, and your power so that you can discover the greatness that lives within you. Think of this podcast as your weekly portion of tools, stories, and teachings that help you reflect on the small victories in your life. Thanks for tuning in, and let's begin. Welcome to the Small Victories podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria. Change is one of life's few guarantees, but how we move through it makes all the difference. Whether it's loss, heartbreak, or a season of uncertainty, transitions can feel like being stuck in muddy waters. But what if the mud isn't the end of your story? What if, like a lotus, it's the very ground from which you rise? In this episode, I'm joined by Angie Lion, author of Emerge, Rise from the Depths, Realign Your Soul, Reclaim What Matters. Angie helps people navigate change with what she calls transitional intelligence, using awareness, adaptability, and resilience to flow with life's river instead of fighting against it. From childhood trauma and personal loss to deep soul work and empowerment, Angie reminds us that you are enough, you are not alone, and everything else is learnable. Angie, thanks for coming on the show.
Wow, thank you. What a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate that and the opportunity to be able to share some of the hard lessons I've learned in life with your listeners.
Thank you for having the courage to do so. I've come to learn in my time as an entrepreneur and as a podcaster that the amount of impact we can have on people usually correlates with the amount of pain we've had to endure in our lives. And so I usually like to start right there with my guests because I know people often don't care about what you have to say until they know how much you care. And so I'd love to hear your origin story. Just like any superhero, as teachers, people who want to do deep soul work with people and make that kind of impact, there is an origin story, and I know yours goes deep. So I'd like just to take a few minutes to have you share with us your story from the beginning and what led you to do this kind of work specifically.
Okay, thank you. Well, yes, I came from humble roots. I was born to a 16-year-old mom. I had 8 out of 10 adverse childhood experiences, so quite a rough upbringing. I had multiple siblings from different, on my mom's side and my dad's side. I had half siblings. I call it a family bush more than like a family tree. And with those adverse childhood experiences came a lot of alcoholism and substance abuse and addiction of all sorts, from food to whatever. And so I was raised in that type of environment, and I was early parentified, basically raising my little brother from age 12 on, and really had to kind of become the adult or the parent and the household. And so I learned a lot of good skills from that, but I also became some of the skills I'm learning to let go of now, but at the time they served me well. So I ended up eventually getting a call from life, I believe, which is life tapping you on the shoulder, a soul nudge of it's time to do something different. And I kept applying to the nursing program in my hometown, and I was not getting in. And I just decided maybe there was more out there for me. Those doors were kept closing and closing. And as much as I wanted it, it wasn't choosing me. And so I decided to pack up my car and move away. And I left my hometown and I got a new job and took a road trip, took myself away from home, landed at Boise State University, where at a hospital that I had started to work at and just started to change my life. In that new environment, I was surrounded by a lot of people that saw potential in me. And so I put myself in a new environment, and that was really helpful. Started to surround myself with people that believed in me and saw a different path for me. And I think also just being around a lot of friends and family mentors that didn't actually know they were mentoring me, but I was watching all along. I ended up eventually getting married and starting my family earlier than I had hoped. I started a family and ended up stopping school for a while and then eventually going back to school after my kids were born and going back into the surgical technology program at Boise State. And I started to really work a lot more with human behavior. At first, it was kind of what I really enjoyed was fixing people and understanding the human body and how I could help people that way, especially being a wounded healer myself. And then eventually it turned into really being fascinated with the way people behave. And I'm wondering why we do the things we do. As I started to work in that field, I was studying more about how we behave and how we operate. And so I had a big set of life quakes, which was death, divorce, and disease. And so during that period, that 5-year period, my life was really falling apart. And that's when I started to have to rebuild my life. And that's when I became aware that while these were all obstacles, there was also opportunity and thinking about who am I now? What kind of life am I going to build after this? After I'm basically an orphan, after I'm a divorcee, I'm a single mom. I started to look at life as how can I turn this into something good for myself? And so while I was going through those horrible and horrific times, there was a lot of pain, a lot of lonely nights, a lot of crying, a lot of tears, a lot of emotions. I really have now learned that was learning how to adapt to life's transitions and what comes on in life, what life throws at us.
Yeah. The 3Ds, death, divorce, and disease. And like they say, when it rains, it pours. And it definitely poured. And it all happened within a very short period of time, all at the same time.
Yeah, 5 years. So I mean, death is hard enough. Then having my hero, my aunt, who had helped raise me in that struggle, in that difficult environment, she got Alzheimer's. And so that lasted for about 3 to 4 years, roughly. And that it also includes being a power of attorney for people. There's a lot of, it's not just the death when you're the person who's in charge of all of the things. So in the meantime, my marriage was falling apart. And the further I mourned, the more our marriage drifted, and it just became insurmountable. And I just didn't know how I was ever going to recover from all of that. And if I would, I'm definitely not the same person. After going through all that resilience, I don't believe you bounce back. I believe you become something completely new. And that's really what I did, is emerge something different, something stronger, something also more caring, also less ego, because life has shown me what's really important as I've went through a lot of these life quakes. And I really think they woke me up to what's important.
It's unfortunate that when you're going through some things and you want to share this with other people to be like, no, this is what's really important. And they don't believe you or they can't grasp the idea because a lot of it comes through experiencing the hard knocks life has in store for you. What would you say to someone who right now maybe not have experienced such deep loss and sorrow or grief, and yet these are life lessons. These are universal life lessons that we could share with people. What would you say to somebody that you wanted to share, like, this is what really matters, but they haven't had those experiences?
Yeah, I think it's really comes down to awareness of whose success script are you following?
Mm.
Because we're all given success scripts from our culture, from our family, from where we live, from our religion. There's a successful script that's been handed to us. And in my book, I discuss success scripts. And I think it's really important to define what success means to you, because if I'm to define success, it's going to mean something different to me than it's going to mean to you or to the listeners. And we just kind of go with the flow. This is where it's kind of like an I'll have what she's having approach to life. And that's, like, oh, they're successful, they're doing this. And we start just comparing and wondering where we are, and really taking the time to figure out what matters to you is how you're going to align your life with that. Because if you're following what everybody else is having, you're never going to get to the point where you know what matters to you. And if you're listening to what is just going on around you, it's going to be chaos. You're not going to be clear. There's not going to be any clarity because there's so many different success scripts out there. And unfortunately, sometimes pain is our biggest teacher, right? And pain and suffering. And sometimes we won't wake up until we have a health scare or a divorce, or we get fired, or something else happens that actually kind of shakes us and wakes us up. But I think it's important that we start to think about, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I think that I need to be doing all these things? Where did that belief come from in the first place? And what does really matter to me? And I don't think enough people put effort into that. It's really about, we usually know what we don't like, but we don't put a lot of energy into what does matter to me. If I only had 5 years left to live, what would matter most? If I only had 5 months or 5 years to live, what would I be doing and how would I be shaping my life?
So what rose to the top of what mattered to you after all those experiences?
Relationships, 100%. Like, at first, I was kind of chasing the success script of, if we just have the kids and you have the dogs and then you have the house and you start to check the boxes and all that stuff. And while those things are great milestones, they don't bring happiness. You don't know before you start adulting how hard adulting is and what a mortgage looks like, taking care of a home, what taking kids to and from sports, and all of those kinds of things, what those entail. And so while those family unit is important, I don't think we understand, or nobody's ever really explained to us how much time that is going to take. And I think it's important to recognize that those things are super important to us, but sometimes we don't prioritize our relationships, or we maybe with our significant other, or maybe we're not prioritizing a relationship with each individual kids, and everything is done with as a unit. Or it's really thinking about, what are we prioritizing? Are we prioritizing sports? Are we prioritizing family time? Are we prioritizing our phones? What are we prioritizing? How we spend our time, our money, and what our calendar reflects is a really good indicator of what we value, regardless of what we say we value.
That's what's come up for me too in the recent loss of my father and a favorite aunt of mine in the last couple of years. It's just like relationships is where I want to invest my time, right? Time is the only thing you cannot rewind or get more of. So it's a matter of identifying where you invest it. And I do say invest on purpose with time, because it's just like money. However, money is always
Renewable.
but yes, it's replenishable, and time is not. So it is our greatest and most precious resource.
Absolutely. I always say that, even when I'm speaking to a crowd or I'm doing a workshop, people giving me their time is their most valuable resource. Your listeners right now are giving their most valuable resource, their time, but hopefully it's time well spent, and that this is an investment in themselves. Personal development, getting to know themselves, all of those types of things. And that's where I am at too. So I really try to prioritize my relationships with my immediate family, my kids and my granddaughter and my in-laws and those types of things. And then my friends who are my chosen family. And so I really try to prioritize those, and people who are important to me, they know they're important to me, and I don't let them go.
Yeah. And sometimes that means we have to initiate. We can't expect or treat relationships like I'm always the one calling and that person never calls me back. That doesn't really matter at that point. It's just a matter of what's important to you and going after that. And like you said earlier, identifying what really is important to you, what matters to you, that could look like different things to everybody. I know that there's one of the longest studies on happiness at Harvard University, and they said that the key to happiness over and over again shows up as relationships. And so we can waste our time, a lot of our time, focusing on being the victim, focusing on our grief, and not saying that we shouldn't take time to process when things feel sad or we have a great loss, either in life or with our health or our jobs or relationships. There is time to process, but we don't want to waste a lot of time, because that's our most precious commodity, doing things in a way that doesn't help us move forward effectively. So I want to transition this part of the conversation to transitional intelligence, because it's something I've never heard of, that concept. So could you just get us all on the same page and define transitional intelligence?
Yeah. So transitional intelligence is basically the ability to navigate uncertainty and move through life's challenges, like with more skill and resilience. So understanding that it's a skill, and it's something that you can build, just like emotional intelligence. You can build those skills and manage yourself and understand your emotion and understand the emotions of other people. Transitional intelligence is the series of transitions, and you're transitioning, and they're psychological. And there's a lot of emotions that go with each of these transitions and different stages of the transitions. And so if you think about a transition, they always start with an end. Something ends, your health ends, your relationship ends, the job ends, the life you thought you had ends. Whatever it is, something comes to an end. You get a phone call and your life changes, right? From that moment on. So something ends, and then you're stuck in the messy middle. Or you know it's coming. It could be becoming an empty nester. You're going to be an empty nester at the end of this year or whatever. So you know the end is near. And then we have the messy middle, and that's the soup. If you think about the caterpillar being in the chrysalis and just really turning into the soup, and it's messy and it's dark and it's lonely, and this is the grief, right? There's a lot of grief of loss and why me and the victim and, oh, I hate this and I wish things would go back to the way they were. And if life could just be like it was. But all of this is happening, is there's a transformation happening, and there's parts that are no longer going to be. That old self is no longer going to be there when you emerge through that other side. And that other side is when we get to the new beginning. When we get to the new beginning phase, that's when it starts to be more of a fresh slate, an opportunity, starting from scratch. And we know that fresh starts and starting from scratch and possibility and creation is a lot more inviting. It's scary to some people, but it also is exhilarating too, because you don't know how good it could be. I think about even the idea of podcasting. When I look back at my life quakes, looking back at that, I never even knew I would ever be on a podcast because podcasts didn't even exist.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that there was a possibility of starting a podcast, being on a podcast, or any of this stuff, because I didn't even know the things that were possibilities didn't even exist then. And so when you think about new beginnings, I was imagining a new future and a better future for myself. And I had hopes for a future, a brighter and better future for myself, but I still couldn't imagine things that didn't exist yet. But I did believe that I could turn my life around, and I could turn pain into purpose, and that I could turn my wounds into wisdom. And I really do think that is the key, is learning and growing, and then being able to share that with other people. And that's the purpose part, sharing so that you can help other people overcome their hurts.
Someone coming from a tumultuous childhood to going through 5 years of deep work and in response to what was happening around you with life circumstances, how did you get to this point of believing, like, you know what, I could turn this into something, or I see the opportunity? I am sure your parents died and you weren't like, let me see how I could turn this around to opportunity.
I was deep in the suck, so I don't want to sugarcoat it or make people feel like that there's something wrong with them for being in the grief. But when you get sick of living in the grief, okay, when you're stagnant in stagnant waters for too long and you get sick of yourself, there comes a point when you're ready for a change and you're sick of being in the messy middle and you know there's another way. That's when your soul's calling you to make a change, right? And to start to get out of that. And for me, that became getting out of victim mindset. I was a victim for a lot of my life, but it would be easy for me to stay there because of what had happened to me. But I had to recognize that I had victim mindset and that it wasn't helping me. And my complaining was not helping at all. And I was complaining so much that I'm sure people just were cringy, about me. When I think back, I'm sure they were cringy. But I finally got to the point, and my brother was just blunt, which he is. He's one of those, he was doing AA at the time. And one of the sayings is that he brought to me was, Angie, at some point, you're no longer a victim. You're a volunteer.
So good.
Yeah. So that was one of those slaps across the face, gut punch, was something that I was like, he was tired of me complaining about my life, my marriage. And I feel like I just did that a lot because I didn't know what to do and I was scared to make a change and I didn't want to be the one to do it. And I knew in my soul we kept going around and around the same kinds of things. And it was stagnant and it was not healthy. And I knew it, but I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be the one to do it or to call it off, because I didn't want to be a quitter and I didn't want to be this and I didn't want to be this. So I just hoped that maybe they would eventually, and then I wouldn't have to be the bad guy. But eventually I had to be authentic and be true to myself and be true to him and say, this isn't working and we can't continue down this path. And yeah, it was hard and it was messy and there was judgment and there was a lot of messy metal in that. In the
Yeah.
same time that I was going through the grief of losing my parents and my aunt.
Yeah.
It was really messy and scary and dark.
Yeah. If someone was going through that darkness right now, what would you say to them?
You're not alone. Even though it feels like you're alone and you want to curl up in a little ball and die, even if you do feel like you want to die, that's normal. I think when you get into that place, don't go there. Find help. Find your lifelines. You know that person that will be there for you. And if you don't, there's the helplines. There's helplines. But I would venture to say most of us have one person that we could call if we were down and they would help us, but they don't know if we don't tell them.
Yeah.
They can help us if we do not share that we need help. And that is your biggest barrier. You are your biggest obstacle as it relates to getting help. Nobody can read your mind or knows when you're spiraling downward. And so reaching out and asking for help is the best thing you can do for yourself. And that's where you're going to start to change your life, asking for help.
Yeah. And perhaps you don't want to ask for help from people because of your afraid of judgment. This is a shameless plug for Angie's book, Emerge, learning from other people's experiences, seeing how they got through it. Because sometimes the fear comes from not being able to see beyond the pain. You can't even see the possibilities of what it would look like if you chose to end a marriage or quit a job or let go of some bad habits. Like you may not be able to see beyond that. And that's normal, but
Yeah.
we can't allow that uncertainty or that the darkness to keep us held back. And so someone like Angie, who wrote a book, who wrote her life story, we just need to see someone else that, okay, they did it. So
Yeah.
it's not out of reach for me.
And that's why I wrote it, because I really want people to feel empowered that if I can do it, they can do it too. And there are threats, imagined and real, right, in our brains that we're going through when you're in the soup and that messy middle. And in the book, I talk about them. In my coaching, they're called triple threats. But in my book, I call them the lion, the tiger, and the bear, because I really think that if you think about how your brain sees these threats, even if they're real or even imagined, the lion represents you, your inner critic, your fears, your self-limiting beliefs. It's the voice inside that says you're not ready, you'll fail, you're too much, you're not enough, you're not safe. So those aren't truths, but those are fears, and they're there. And you got to be aware of them and acknowledge that they're there and start to notice them. The tiger represents your close relationships. So your family, your friends, your loved ones are the people or approval that you fear losing. the people whose disapproval you dread. So that's the tiger. And then the bear represents the larger environment, more like your community, your culture, your workplace, or your society. So the voice of the world is saying, this is how you should look. This is how you should lead. This is how you should live. So there's a lot of fears going on, both internally and externally. And it's important to recognize those fears, that not all of them are truths, but they are, your brain is trying to keep you safe. And so understanding that you've got different stages of the transition, you've got a lot of fears and a lot of emotions going on, swirling in the soup. So starting to understand that all this is normal. The darkness is normal. I've got to get rid and shed some of the old me. I'm going to rebuild and emerge something new. And all of the fears and scared and darkness are normal. It's asking for help. It's finding other people who have made it through. It's finding your lifelines, people who have done it. And it doesn't have to be somebody, just like you said, some of mine have been some of my favorite podcasters, authors, Brene Brown, many people that I have listened to, or before podcasts even came around, when it was just audiobooks. I turned my car into my classroom and I would listen and know that there was hope. And so it can be a friend or a family member. It could be a coach. It could be getting a coach. It could be going through counseling. I recommend it all, to be honest. If you've had a really dark past when you're trying to I recommend making personal development be your full-time job. I know we all have jobs, but you can listen to a podcast when you're getting ready for work. You can listen to one on your way to work. You can listen to a book. You can join a book club and discuss things and go deeper. There's so many things. Now we have so much information. I think the biggest challenge now is noise, but it's listening for something that really resonates with your soul. So if it's something that really resonates, then that's a good sign for you that, wow, they said something, they spoke some truth to me. And so I want to continue to listen to that. I'm going to continue to learn a little bit more. Maybe they said a new word that I'm going to go AI and figure out what that word is a little bit more. So you can, once you hear something and you resonate with it and it sticks, you're going to become more curious about it. And then you're going to want to learn more about it. And as you learn more, you start to go, these are tools. I wish I had learned these earlier in life, but I didn't. So I guess it's time to start learning them now.
Yeah.
We didn't have a word for this back then either.
It's interesting. I always get to interview amazing humans on my podcast. It's one of the reasons I love doing the podcast.
That's because you're an amazing human and you attract amazing humans.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Blushing. I got to interview a gentleman and he let me know that inside of us is a molecule and they call it the bliss molecule. I don't know the scientific name off the top of my head right now. I'm not a scientist. I'm a communicator. So this bliss molecule, it's in all of us. And it goes to show that we were created to naturally be in a state of joy. And I know my father just passed away 1 month today. And it was like I'd have moments of grief, and I still do. But one time I got a message and it said, don't worry, you're like, I created you for joy. So just hold on to that and know that like he's okay, you know? And the grief is an important process. I'm not saying don't go through the process of the chrysalis and the unbecoming and the unlearning to be able to become something new again. I love your definition of resilience, that it's not bouncing back as who you were, but becoming something new. And that butterfly metaphor fits so perfectly for that. And we should all aim for that. So that every time that we're going through those dark times, it really is an opportunity for us to become something more, to be more refined. And sometimes that requires us to destroy what was already there that doesn't serve us any longer. Angie, tell us, do you have any other last thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners before I let you go for this episode? It went by so fast.
I would just like to say, if you are grieving, sit in that grief for a while and feel it and allow the emotions to flood over you. And for someone like yourself, who it's been a month, don't be surprised when you think you've processed and you went through it and a wave just takes you down, takes you out. That's how grief is. It's not like it goes away, but the waters, I feel like they become more steady. And then you're not just like being turned over by the waves. You finally can stand up. You're finally okay. And then eventually waves are going to wash over you, waves of grief and joy and feeling. What is that quote? Grief is proof of love, or that you've loved. Is that the
Yeah.
quote? Grief is proof of love.
Yeah. I don't know the exact quote, but yes, I would agree. I actually got to interview someone else, and their book, title of the book is Grief is the Price You Pay for Love.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And so when you do feel that, I think it's important to recognize that you love deeply and that person is never gone from you. They may be physically, but you've never lost their memories. You never have lost the times you shared. They're not a set of keys. You didn't lose them. There is so much there that you can bring yourself back to. There's a lot around your mindset about being able to access them at any point. And that's what I feel like I tap into. I can access them at any point. A good memory with them, a fond memory, things I remember, things I wish I could do still with my mom or with my dad. And just know that their presence is there, even though you might not be able to see it. And that's something that's worked for me. I'm not saying it will work for everyone, but for me, it's been helpful to tap into. That's proof of love. And love doesn't ever go away. It's energy and it is always there. And that is not lost.
Thank you for that reminder. I'm going to encourage everybody to get Angie's book. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes so you can access that. She would be someone who would be a great light in your time of darkness. Or maybe you don't want to have to wait for the darkness to come. There are things in her books that have you be able to transition change that may not feel so deep, like the loss of a loved one or the loss of health. It could be, I have to make a move because my husband got a new job, you
Or
know?
retire. I know I'm going to retire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you said empty nesting, I was like, yep, I'm going through that right now. Last year was our last year with the kid in the house. So it doesn't have to be so dire. But if you are interested in learning more about how do I live life even more magnificent? How do I live life with even more light? You don't have to have darkness to have more light. Let's just keep creating that. And if you're interested in that, get her book. Again, I'll link that in the show notes. Emerge by Angie Lion. And Angie, do you do coaching?
I do. And I do workshops and speaking as well. So, and that's all on my website, angieleon.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you so.
If today's conversation with Angie Leon resonated, let it be a gentle reminder. Transitions don't define you, they refine you. Every muddy moment, every broken piece can become the fertile ground for something beautiful to bloom. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are becoming. And when we stop fighting life's current and instead learn to flow with it with awareness, adaptability, and resilience, we discover our own power to rise, realign, and reclaim what truly matters. That's what it means to live victoriously, to meet life's challenges with courage, to choose growth over fear, and to trust that even in the depths, you are being prepared to emerge. Thank you for joining another episode of the Small Victories podcast. And until we meet again, be blessed.
Come into me, show me what I need to see.